Hi guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. So I had a lesson this week where a student was a bit confused about the different terminology between harmony, chord changes, harmonic movements, chord movements, all these kind of vaguely interchangeable terms that we talk about. And it was movement specifically that he was interested in understanding. So I want to give you a little, I suppose, metaphor, simile, whatever the correct one of those words is, I haven't got a clue, to give you a little idea maybe to better understand what each of those little things really means. So we're going to equate music to a film. Now, the film itself, the entire film, would be like an entire album or an entire show, but a film's normally broken down into scenes. Now, a scene generally, in case you're not up with your film terminology, is where you're set in one location, you're set in one room, and you maybe get, 4 or 5 minutes of action happening in that one room. So that's kind of our equivalent to a song, 4 or 5 minutes worth of music. It gives us a song. Now, back to the movie, that scene, you generally are not, unlike a YouTube video here, in a movie, we generally don't just use one camera. You'd have cameras set up all around that scene. You'd maybe have one in each corner of the scene. You'd maybe have one focused on each actor's face. You'd maybe have one that shows the entire room. You'd have quite a few cameras, probably 10 or so. Those cameras, the exact shot those cameras are giving you, are kind of like the chords. In a song, in a good song, you don't have hundreds of chords. You have a handful of chords that work well together, and you keep swapping between them. Like in a good movie scene, we keep swapping between cameras to give you a really good perspective of what's going on. So those camera changes are the equivalent of chord changes. We're moving from one chord to another. And so finally that gives us this idea of movement. So what is movement, or harmonic movement, or harmonic color, all these things we talk about in music? What are those? Well, if we think about a specific camera shot, like this one that's on me at the minute, this is doing a very good job at getting the point across that it's supposed to be doing. You can see me. Now, if this were a film and we were trying to evoke some sort of emotion, maybe this camera might zoom in. Maybe the camera might zoom back out. Maybe the camera would pan across the scene slightly, pan left or pan right, or rotate around. Now, what it's not doing is changing camera. We're still using that same camera, and we're just slightly sweeping, we're just slightly moving, slightly zooming in. Now, if you wanted to, you could say that was now a different shot, but it's not. It's just slightly adding a bit of colour and emotion to the original camera setup. You've still just got that one view from that camera, but it's slightly giving you a little bit of different perspective. Now, the equivalence in music is when we move through maybe a chord scale or just some interesting voices, whilst the chord is supposed to be static according to the chart, we're just giving the listener a slightly different perspective of the tonality at that point. So we're saying, listen to this interesting note that exists within this scale. Isn't that nice? And isn't it nice how it moves to this? But we're still generally on an E minor chord, or whatever the chord is. The camera itself hasn't changed. We're still on that fixed chord. We're just slightly moving through some different colours and accentuating the things that are good about that particular chord, and maybe trying to reduce the things that are less effective, trying to use those a little bit less. So I hope that made a little bit of sense, but just to summarise that, the movie is the full album. A specific scene from within that movie you could think of as being the song. The chords themselves are how many cameras you have set up in that scene, how many static cameras that are there, how many different perspectives you can see that scene from. And at that point, you've got a good movie. You've got some really interesting shots set up there. However, the icing on the cake is just tiny little movements from those cameras, little zooms, little pans, and those just add that tiny little bit of extra information, really guide the viewer's eye to where you want them to look. And in music, by moving through a certain chord scale, outlining certain tonalities whilst the chord itself is static, we really guide the listener's ear to focus on what's important at that particular point in the music. I know similes and metaphors work better for some people than others, but hopefully you found that a little bit more illuminating. In terms of actual examples, check out all my videos on the channel. There's loads of examples here already, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with any of your friends who might find this metaphor useful to stay up to date with all my future videos. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.
Roll up, let me embed a story you'll never forget. A drip, drip, we're drowning in debt now. You can't buy your way out.